The reason you haven't got a job or you haven't been successful is because of this. Let's change that. And we changed it. The following week you got a job.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today's video is going to be really special for anyone who is planning to move international, because today I am going to be interviewing one of the PhD professors here in the UK. Currently he is a senior lecturer at my university. His name is Mark Bentley. I'm going to be linking his LinkedIn down below, so if you want to connect with him, if you want to talk to him directly too, you can go reach out to him. So anyway, he's a really open-minded professor. I have had a great time learning with him, and he also agreed to give me this interview. So today we are discussing some of the very important questions which I think any international student, including me, needed answers to when I was moving to make my decisions. We spoke about what courses are good, and also about things like placement. Should you actually opt for it? How do you secure a job here? How do you get that 5-year stay back? Everything has been discussed in this video, and it's all in an Indian context because I'm an Indian student. And also Mark Bentley has worked with a lot of Indian students, so he knows what he's talking about. He also has worked with the placement department in our university, so he knows how to secure placements as well. So anyway, I really recommend you watch the entirety of the video so you benefit from the full length of it. But if you want, I will list timestamps down below for you to jump to the crucial parts which you feel are important to you. So with that being said, I hope you enjoy this video, and let's directly jump right into this interview. So before we start this video, I firstly want to welcome you to my channel. It's very few professors who are open-minded enough to be able to talk to students like a friend rather than a professor and relate with us in that space. So big thanks to you for being on the channel. And I feel all my viewers will also benefit from what you have to say today. So.
Absolutely. No, it's a pleasure to be here. One of my students, obviously, to go beyond that student kind of professor relationship is a privilege. I've always said that, and this is absolutely a great example. So yeah, it's great to be here and be involved.
Thank you so much for saying that. Okay, so before we dive into the interview, I just want to say that there is a huge gap between the education systems in India and the UK. So I feel it needs a little bit of a structure before we start off with the questions. So I want you to comment on what you feel the differences are like and what the Indian student should expect when they're moving abroad.
You say, and I take on board, you say that there's a difference between the Indians and the UK kind of system. I think you'll find that whether it be Australia, America, Canada, I think it's just radically different in so many ways. So any student that's looking at this and thinking they want to come and study abroad, international student, let's just keep this just to the UK, let's just think in general. You've been used to a system that is very much different, clearly, and I think one of the main areas that's different for me, that's really very, very clear, it's how we actually teach. It's what we call the pedagogy. Yeah, it's how we actually teach a subject or a topic or a theme. And where Western particular education kind of really wants to take the actual student is getting them to be very more analytical, evaluative, and that is kind of really understanding not just the surface elements, but a very deep understanding of the topic. So what does that really mean? That means a lot of engagement. A remarkable amount of engagement and kind of self-will for the student to really want to understand what's expected of them, and it's getting that very deep understanding of the topic or theme, and that, I believe, from my understanding of Indian education system, is the radical difference. It's going to take a lot of willpower, a lot of commitment, and a lot of engagement. That's the really, really key issue.
Yeah, and personally, me being an Indian student, I can relate with what you're saying, because I've studied here for a while now, and I've understood that there's a lot of gap, right? We've been taught to by heart stuff a lot more, and teachers don't really pay heed to developing our presentation or our communication or skills which are needed, analytical. All these skills are not really focused upon, especially in commerce fields. So when we're doing degrees with commerce, especially, I feel the sole key is to get a job. That is what they focus on, and they don't focus on developing our skills as well.
No, I can well believe that, and I think that's a really interesting, a very personal point you mentioned there. It's ironic this has come out in our conversation. Is we look at my own research, my PhD, I'm kind of looking at thinking skills, because I honestly and truthfully believe now that the 21st century student has got to think differently, and got to think in different dimensions. For me, and my studies particularly are around systems thinking, about critical thinking, around design thinking. And there are 3 different ways of thinking about a problem, an issue, or a topic or theme. And I think that is going to be the differentiator with successful people in the future that can think differently, can see things from different perspectives. So getting back to what you described and what you feel is such a difference, is what we kind of come across it from a research perspective. We want students to be more evaluative, very analytical, and start being that part of that kind of research kind of feel to it. That's how we kind of teach differently, and that takes so many different thinking capacities that you may not have been requested to use in the past. And I think that's a big area of development that is absolutely key in Western kind of higher education.
Exactly, because I feel it focuses on some things I think we do not really need to remember. For example, the dates of events when it occurred and how it happened and what came to the history of formation of this theory. I feel those are things which we never study in the UK education system, right? The things which we study on is how to apply this and how this research would be correlating with what you are focusing to find out. I think that is something which we never talk about.
No, and I think to capsulate that in literally a few words, it's taking the learning in a Western sense, taking it from a surface learning into a deep level of learning. And I think that's the difference. It's being a deep learner again and really get that deep perspective. And like you said, how to apply that. Because at the end of the day, you know, people are going through the education system because they want a job. So an employer is going to want this person to apply those skills, apply that knowledge. So you have to have a good understanding of how the application aspects of what you're being taught and what you're teaching, what you're learning, most definitely.
Absolutely, especially the point about the employer. I think a lot of Indians who are moving abroad really do want to experience employment here as well before going back. And so what would be your comment on that? Because we are not used to this research-based application. So, and that 1 year or 2 years courses which we do here, most of them are 1 year, so in the UK especially. So do you really think that 1 year would be enough for us to grasp and be employable in the UK? Or what do you think your suggestion?
I think I'm a very big believer to get the value. Talk about valuing, aren't we? So creating that value and getting the most out of the experience. I think my own personal choice would be 2 years. For 12 months, for a year, you're going to be very much around the knowledge, the learning, in the class, doing all that kind of stuff. But to go to a placement and do a year, I've got some placement students currently, actually, that have been with this in September, and they have gone into a wide range of very diverse kind of vocational kind of roles. I kind of say now, the experience they're getting, we can tell them what experience they're going to get from the placement, but the narrative and the comment that's coming back from these students, it surpassed, that experience surpassed anything they thought of. So it really makes things real, where they can apply what they've learned kind of within the workplace. They can really understand culture a lot better than just being in a university kind of environment, which is fine, but it's taken to a different dimension. It's built up this skill, it's applying the skills, and quite frankly, from the employability perspective, when they go look for full-time employment, then they're not saying we can do this, they can literally show them. It's a kind of what I would say, tell me, which you would in an interview, now show me. So you've got letters of commendation, you can actually give them examples of what you've physically done. So I think that underpins the knowledge and the skills that you've actually acquired while overseas teaching, learning. But at the same time, you can show that you actually applied these, and that's going to be the difference. If you're going for a job role, let's say in India, I'm sure, and I look from the employer point of view, I am looking for people who's physically, practically done this, and it certainly sets people aside. So I think the answer to your question, I would always believe that a minimum of about 2 years would be ideal. You get all the theoretical elements of it, you get that kind of conditioning to the UK, because I accept that it's a big difference. And then you're going in the wider world and kind of applying those skills and developing things further. And I think another thing as well, it's a throwaway comment, but for me it's important, it really does set you apart in terms of developing your kind of confidence, and that's absolutely key. And I think sometimes with more younger people, I can say that as I'm getting older now, I think sometimes that is missing, that confidence. These kind of situations take you out of your comfort zone, and it will change you as a person.
That's true. So would you say then that placements is a better idea for Indian students? Because I have seen and I've reviewed a lot of YouTubers before coming here myself, and most of them speak of placements as a backup to stay in the UK, right? So they say things like, if you don't get a placement here and if you end up not getting a job, you'll not get that extra year to stay back, which means you'll have to go back. And a lot of Indians are looking for that escape. They want to come out of their cocoon, they want to come out of the country, and they want to experience something. And they are just looking for a backup with placement. They're not looking for it as a extra experience or an insight into how the researching is. So would you say it would be a better option if everyone considers placements, or would you think a year is enough?
No, it's certainly placement for me is imperative. what I said before, you're actually applying what you've learned and then growing as an individual and building that confidence and seeing different perspectives. I think it's imperative that students do come with a placement in mind, not as a backup, but very clear. It's a 2-year program, 3-year program, whatever it's going to be, and that placement's absolutely key.
So I spoke to a lot of ex-students as well regarding the same point. Their opinions have been a little different because they say that the placement year was, again, as I said, solely a backup for them. And most of them drop out of it rather than opting to go ahead with it after coming here because they realize they can get a job, let's say, for example, like a Sainsbury's. So I work in Sainsbury's. I have a couple of Indians who work there who've been working there for a year.
Yeah.
And instead of getting their placement year, they drop out and they continue with Sainsbury's because now they've understood that, okay, it is comfortable. I have a job. I can support myself and then do my PSW, which is apply for a post-grad stay back. So in that case, they don't really second the idea that placements is a good thing. They rather say that it is a waste of time, is what I quote. They say it's a waste of time because I feel rather than getting a placement, you can just work, save some money, pay off your student debt, which is the case for a lot of the students coming here, and then try a PSW and then directly apply for a job. And then there are articles which say Indians are here without jobs for so many years. And I think all this is related to what you're saying, that I think placement is the key which will help them to get the jobs. But I think they're taking out that whole key with removing placements from the equation.
What you described there is a very mixed pot.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say, very, very mixed pot. So let me just strip back and get under some of those comments that you made. And I think you're absolutely right. I fully agree. I think it's very much around context and it's very much around the individual.
Yeah.
Okay. And as I said a few moments ago, around what I would say preparation. Let me strip back to that kind of stuff. So I think that the student themselves, it is incumbent, and I need to be very clear, it's incumbent on the student to find that opportunity. To find that opportunity, the student is going to have to be very engaged and very committed and very driven that they are going to get that placement. That's absolutely true. And they have to prepare CVs. They've got to understand that when they apply for the job, how they write, the kind of stuff they put. Give you an example. There was one student only last year, sorry, the year before, who came to me quite distraught. It was prior to Christmas, and she had to find her own placement, and she was struggling. And I remember questioning, I said, have you applied for jobs? And she said, yes, I have. And she brought out about 20 or 30 applications. And she said, what am I doing? I said, look, to prove I'm kind of job search. I said, that's fine, it's not an issue. I said, now let's look at your CV and let's look at the kind of letter that you actually apply. Immediately, the CV wasn't right. It wasn't right for the British market. The letter that she wrote wasn't really selling herself. And I basically said, the reason you haven't got a job or you haven't been successful is because of this. Let's change that. And we changed it. The following week, she got a job. So you've got to understand what it takes to get the job. I think interesting point you said as well, and I think this is something that, can I say, saddens me, is the fact that I'd see too many students, they will come to UK and they will go for a job, okay, a work placement, and it doesn't reflect what they've actually studied.
Yeah.
So I've got to say this, I'll be quite open, and it saddens me greatly, is we have a student who is studying an MSc, studying supply chain, so we're really getting into a very specialist area, and it's a phenomenal, okay, it's a phenomenal kind of topic and subjects and opportunities. And you speak to them, some of the students, and they say, yeah, I've got a job. You think, great, where you're working, and they're working in a restaurant, or they're working. Now, how does that actually link to what they've studied? So sometimes, I think through lack of preparation, or the will, or the engagement, or the tenacity to get the job that they want of the organisation, I think that is, at times, that is quite debilitating, and they're not really doing themselves a favour. So some of the people and circumstances you mentioned, I think that is at play sometimes, that dimension's there. They haven't really done what they need to do to get the placement. And I think the third element of it, there will always be some students, and I accept this, that will want to simply get into that economic situation, earn money. They've got to really ask themselves the questions before they even go on international student, whether it's the UK, anywhere in the world. They have to have that in a dialogue with themselves and ask the question, what do I want out of this experience? What do I want out of it? And there's only you as an individual can answer that. And you've got to be prepared to be a kind of an individual and make that decision and not be influenced by other people. And what we see some people that come, you know, to overseas and they stick with the same people And I think this is an opportunity to diversify, to get different thought processes, different perspectives of life, and they fail to do that. So you've got to really think about it, what you want out of this experience, because this can actually really make your future, or not, as the case may be. And if you are going forward, as we've discussed there, the placements, you've got to make sure that you're single-minded. You need to do whatever is necessary, number one, to get the placement and ensure it's the right placement that's going to give you value on your CV for full-time employment after the programme. That's absolutely key. And I don't think international students really sit down and really consider that to the depth that they need to do, and I think that's where many fall short. That worries me. Sorry to go on, but I find it fascinating. What we're doing now, it's getting that message over, because I do want students to really sit down and have that private conversation, not with family, not with friends, privately ask themselves the question, what do I want to do? How can I get to where I need to be? My job is to get you to think differently, to see things differently, yeah? And you need to be a different person when you leave this programme than what you were when you went in. And every week and every month, you have to ask yourself the question, am I changing? Yeah. Is this experience changing me? Am I going in the right direction? Can I feel myself moving forward and progressing? And again, that inward dialogue has got to come from the student. And I think the point I make is, before they even join the programme, the course, they need to be comfortable with that and start to get in that reflective kind of mode on a frequent basis, and let that guide and really be the feedback to themselves there. Am I doing right? Am I really progressing? Am I developing? And that's key. And that goes through the actual placement. You know, if they're going down that line, they've got to understand what they need to do to get to that particular point.
Yeah, so strongly suggest that placements is good.
It has to be. Skills are kind of key. We can talk about knowledge, you know, it's skills. That was the headline. It was the mantra. It was skills.
Yeah.
I don't go away from that, because that's true. We can talk a good game, we can show this knowledge, but can we apply it? And I think a placement student is showing that it can apply. I think that's key.
From whatever you just said, there are two very major things which I want to address especially. So one of the things which I have noticed, especially with Indian students, even though if they are an MBA, MSc, whatever, I don't think we really value the degree that much as the UK does, right? So the whole idea behind our MBAs in India, especially, I've seen it, is even if you do an MBA, you have no weightage. You still start at the bottom. And the funny thing is, here when you come, the Indians are not prepared with that wide view. They still have that narrow vision that, okay, my MSc is going to get me a starter's job. So any job is fine, as long as it's a job and I'm getting paid. And I don't think they ever let go of that currency difference which they come with. So they see the pay from Sainsbury's. I personally, when I told my mom itself, so she is a very high placed corporate employee herself. But even then, when I told her that I'm getting paid around this much, she was just like, whoa, that's a lot, right? But that's because of the currency difference. And we don't realize that that pay doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. And that is not the reason why you've come here. But a lot of things I've noticed with people especially is they don't realize the wide range which our degrees provide us. So they still think in that very narrow vision, and they realize that any job is a good job, and they take it because they're like, okay, I'm making 30 lakhs Indian. And that ideally is not possible for an Indian who's doing an MBA till 8 to 10 years later. So they feel, okay, I'm ahead of the Indians who are doing MBAs, or ahead of the people who are 8 years into the job as well, because my MBA is giving me the place to stay. But they don't need that MBA to get that job. They are very underpaid. It's like the theory where there are a lot of farmers, but after a point, the more farmers you add to the field, it's not going to add to the productivity, because overall productivity is still low per individual farmer. So it's same like that. Our degree is way too high, but it doesn't get used. The skills which we have learned there doesn't get applied into this particular field. So the 8 years which we get is just monetary. But if we take that experience, go back to India, we will still start at the bottom, even though our pay scale was so high. So I think they don't let that idea get off their head. When they come here, they see the money and they close off. They don't think that the MSc can actually give them a bigger pay. I feel they really need to realize that. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right, and I do kind of sympathise with that. I understand why, the practicalities, the pragmatism of it, absolutely. I mean, it's very difficult to get anybody away from that way of thinking. I fully agree. And when I talk to undergrads and even postgrads, I said, don't think for a minute that's the end. This is the start. So I think what you've got to understand is, when you get an MSc or an MA or MBA from, let's say, from the West, okay, I want my message to students is to say, now you start it, okay? And what you do is, remember, what is it giving you extra? It's giving you kudos, it's giving you status, you know? it is up to you to network, it is up to you to build those networks and really engage with industry sector people. And over time, you'll find that they will respect the fact that you've kind of been taught overseas, you've had that international experience, so you're very flexible, you've built skills. And I'm sure if we actually, as students, use that kind of approach and that mindset, I think some of these students can do a lot better, much quicker, rather than wait that 6, 7, 8 years. They can actually make change pretty quick within their personal branding.
Coming to the point where skills have become such an important and integral part, what do you think should the Indians be focusing on in that 1 or 2 years time frame for them to develop their skills and become employable here in the UK or even in India?
I think skills, it's some of the skills that organisations are asking for. So I think communication is always very, very important, and that skill never goes away. So businesses want their people to actually be able to, future employees, to be able to communicate with customers, with clients, with people within the organisation. They're the skills that, looking from a placement perspective, that's what you're out there to get that opportunity to really learn those from the people and very quickly put those into practice and then take those back into your actual job or whatever. But the key thing is to capture that on your CV and even capture instances and evidence of when you've done that. So because communication, teamwork, that isn't going away anytime soon. It's always going to be the case, and we're still even in this high-tech kind of world.
So do you think there is some sort of volunteer work or something on those lines which could further add to the CV apart from the general placements which the students do?
Yes, I think, remember, a volunteer organisation is an organisation. It has to function. It has to have a focus. It has to have something that it's kind of working towards some objectives. Mm-hmm. That's no different than a commercial organisation. So it's just a different market it serves. I suppose the financials are kind of different in that respect. But basically the operation, it has to be financed, it has a market, all that kind of stuff you will find in every volunteer organisation. So again, and I'll go back to the word you used before more than once, reframing, and kind of looking for its opportunity to be in a different, and this is a key word, it's reframing and looking for a different context. It's looking at a different context, looking at business from a different perspective altogether. And yeah, absolutely. So they can be actually found certainly within a volunteered kind of organisation. Absolutely right.
You have been your entire career in a field which is very niche for the longest period of time. Now it has blown after the pandemic, which is supply chain. And how do you feel about that? How do you feel that now the students should consider that? Or do you think it's a good area now to be in? Or would you recommend it? Because a lot of Indians don't even look for that as an option.
So one challenge I always had in my previous job, I was working at college, is to get students to think about supply chain and logistics as a career, and they just didn't get it. Or it's the, what's the word I'm looking for? It's the association. They would just see a dirty big HGV lorry going and think that's logistics. But I said, really, and what else? Well, there's nothing really else going on. Okay. So I said, would you be interested in data science? Would you be interested in automation? Would you be interested in robotics? That's where we need to be, a sense logistics. That's where the modern day logistics is. It's not the old warehouse and the old lorries and that kind of stuff. There's a lot more to it now. It's a lot more scientific. AI is involved with that in terms of forecasting kind of demand and supply and that kind of stuff. And I think the other dimension now, which is very, very important for supply chain, is sustainability. Where's this product come from? How's it put together? How's it manufactured? What's the actual components and that kind of stuff, what we call the life cycle assessment. That is now taking supply chain to the next level, and we're really now into serious science. So I think there's so much opportunity. And I also would say that don't think, I'm not clever enough, or I'm not really at that level. In logistics, in supply chain, there is a position for everybody of any ability. And you can learn on the job, and you can really develop and move through, into management and so on. And I've got to say now that a lot of the best, I've got to say, supply chain professionals I've worked with or aware of have really come from the bottom and really learned every element of that supply chain process. So it is, for me, not because I'm a supply chain practitioner, it is something that Indian students really want to look at, because there's so much opportunity that's got to happen. It's got to go down that direction for supply chain. Absolutely.
So before we conclude, I just want to ask you one last question, and that is, we always jump onto the very new thing, and right now for Indians especially, the new thing is moving abroad. I think that has become the new in thing in India. So what would be your advice if you were talking to them right now, and if they are watching this video, what would your advice be?
It was quite simple, and it doesn't take much working out. My personal advice, and coming from me as an individual and my context on a lot of things, it's number one, by all means, go abroad and internationally and take whatever opportunity you can in terms of learn about the culture, learn about different ways of working, have an open mind, but have those 2 years, but work really, really hard, okay? But this is the punchline. It's be proud of being India.
Yeah.
Be proud, be very proud of what it's gone through and where it will go. Be very, very proud. And be ready to actually take that experience back to India and make sure that that country actually, at the end of the day, really benefits from that. And you be, as we said before, be the change. Have the confidence to be the change. As we said before in the interview, I can understand the challenges, but be prepared to take a different perspective. Look at things from a different dimension. Take that back, but be proud of being Indian and be proud of how you can contribute to that country's future, because it's got a magnificent future if it's played right.
True. I think that's a wonderful point you made, that a lot of Indians need to be proud of where they are coming from, and I think identifying with that is more important for them.
Sometimes, it's interesting you said, and I might have this wrong, but sometimes I do speak to people who come from India from a student perspective, and they feel that, I get the impression sometimes they feel a little fragile and not confident, and they need to be, because they've a lot to give, they've a lot to be proud of, and I want to see that in the classroom. That's what I really do. And I normally find that is when we give things, for example, like presentations, people are very loath to give presentations, and that, what is it? Is it laziness, or is it they haven't got the confidence, or what? But they need to be very proud and stand there and be themselves and really develop those kind of skills, because that's what's going to be, that kind of confidence, that kind of belief is going to be needed for the future, without a shadow of a doubt. But I believe they've got so much, Indian students over here, got so much to be proud about. And they need to shout very loud and very hard about it when they come over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel that would be crucial, especially when you're moving international.
Yes, it is. Yeah, absolutely. You've got to get over that. And I
Yeah.
think these kind of videos and the kind of good work that you're doing is going to go a long way to helping that, without a shadow of a doubt.
Hopefully, a lot of people have benefited from this. And thank you so much for
No, it's a
agreeing
pleasure.
to do this. I think I benefited a lot from talking to you, and I think if some of them have really paid attention to what was discussed, I think they have benefited a lot too.
I had an interview a few weeks ago, just one final thing I'll say, and the interview, I was asked about my kind of views and my understanding about when I'm teaching, and one element I said, I'll learn from my students. So I said, I'll learn from my students. I have done that today being with you. So it's been, a big thanks from me to you for allowing me this situation, because it's been great. Again, I've got so much out of it myself.
Thank you so much for saying that. Thank you. It was wonderful.
Thank you.